On behalf of IONS LA, we welcome you all to maybe my most special day of the year when we get Matt Fox. And this is especially incredible because he is bringing to us a new order that I've been praying for as a missionary kid from a very fundamentalist background, where everybody's welcome and everybody can come together as Buddhists and Muslims and Baha'i and even Presbyterians. So we all get to come as brothers and sisters of the earth. And today is, for me, the day that's birthing that. And I'm just so excited that we're going to call it a founder circle of anybody who wants to be part of it, who wants to donate towards it. We're not putting any rules, no limits. You can do as much as you want or as little. We're just thrilled to have Matt with us and thrilled to have you come enjoy it with us too. So Matt Fox has written like 34 books. He's started 4 universities, 2 of which I've been to, so I can personally say, do yourself the greatest gift you can and go see what he's doing now in Boulder, Colorado. They're starting a whole new Fox Institute. And it really was by far the most profound, amazing, life-changing gift I've ever given myself. So he's here in person. I won't take up any more of his time. Dr. Matthew Fox.
So I want to talk this afternoon about a topic that I think we all need to be talking about. And that is the despair that's in the air, and the anxiety, and what we can be doing about it as young people and as elders and all those in between. I was at a conference this summer of 150 scientists who met for a week. They've been doing this for 64 years. Oh, fabulous. Thank you so much. They've been doing this for 64 years. They meet in an island, a star island off of New Hampshire. And I arrived a day late, and my talk wasn't for a couple of days, so I just hung out and listened to the other talks and to the meal and so forth. And when it came my time to talk, I put aside my notes, and the topic they had asked me to talk about, which was Pope Francis's encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si, which in fact was written by a student of mine, like Tati was a student of mine, which I find very ironic, since for 34 years, two bad popes called my work, quote, dangerous and deviant, and now there's a third pope who's plagiarizing from my work. I'm pleased about that for a lot of reasons, not least of which is that I lived long enough to travel the whole circle there. But I put aside my notes on Laudato Si, and instead I talked about what I was picking up those 3 days that I was there from the scientists, and that was despair. It was just very much in the air, a very depressed group of people. Now, part of this is probably because a lot of them, of course, depend on grants for their livelihood, and most scientists today will tell you that, of course, that's drying up because we have a know-nothing party back again after over 150 years. People do not want to know what science has to say because it interferes with their bubbles and their ideologies and their plans, and certainly with their pocketbook. So I spoke about despair, and it was very interesting, and I want to say a few words in general about that today, but then to get into the arena of what we can do about it. Thomas Aquinas, the great 13th century mystic and philosopher and theologian, who was condemned 3 times before they canonized him a saint. You might remember that. Aquinas says, the worst of sins is injustice, but the most dangerous of sins is despair. Because when you're in despair, you don't care about yourself. And then certainly you don't care about others. And he says the worst thing that a human can do is to teach despair. It's really a powerful observation by a very brilliant human being. The worst thing a person can do is to teach despair. So if our media and politicians and whatnot are busy teaching despair, we're in deep trouble. And Aquinas says despair comes from fear. Now I think since 9/11 in 2001, we've been running on fear in this culture. The media has, the politicians have, it's kind of been the gas that's kept it all going. Fear on top of fear on top of fear. The truth is that if you're a North American, it's far more likely you're going to die of being hit by lightning than by a terrorist attack. But look at the industry we built up around the fear of terrorism. But Aquinas says fear gives birth to despair. So I think we've now moved from a fog of fear to a fog of despair. And it's showing in a lot of places. There are actually people who are writing books. I met one at a retreat center where I was doing a retreat this past fall, I think it was, several months ago. And I couldn't believe it. I never heard of this guy. But he had a following. He had his full little retreat group there, 35 people or so. I was doing my thing in another space. But on the ride to the airport, I said, who was that guy? This guy's published a book on how it's all over. It's all over for humankind. Just live, drink, and be merry, and take care of yourself, and of course your own, and let the world just go to hell, because that's where we're all going. And he's making a pretty good living at this. And he's about half my age. So, it really awakened me that this fear, despair, people are making a living on it. And as Aquinas warns us, it's radically dangerous. Radically dangerous. When people give up hope, they literally die. Studies were done years ago on prisoners of war during the Korean War. And now some of them just gave up hope and died the next day. And these were young men. So the issue of biophilia, of loving life, and kicking in with our capacity to create alternatives. The land of hope. And hope is not about optimism. I love David Orr's definition of hope, the eco-philosopher. He says hope is a verb with the sleeves rolled up. Hope is a verb with the sleeves rolled up. My hope is proportionate to the willingness to work. Whether you're 20 or whether you're 80, we are all called at this unique time in human history and planetary history to work, to do our inner work, purify our intentions, our motives, check out why we're really here, what humanity is about, on the one hand, but also to be putting our values into our work world, our citizenship, our parenting, our grandparenting, all the rest. There's so much work that needs doing at a moment like this. There's an ancient teaching that I'd like to share from the Indigenous people of Central America, because I think it names the unique period that we're in. And it's a special period. It's not easy. It's a very special moment to be alive, to be called to work today, to work on our being, on our relationships, on our communities and community building, and on all our institutions. From medicine to religion to politics to education to economics. and media, it all needs work. But this is a teaching about the black jaguar. And this is what the time of the black jaguar means according to the Indigenous people. There will emerge a purifying chaos, in which lies are seen for what they are. And there is a collective craving for returning to the simplest truth. At this confusing time, old group and ethnic identities become debilitated, and millions of humans lack clarity about their future and their true place in the world. The social pillars and belief systems of the conservative past are broken, yet the new pillars are not built yet. It is a difficult time, but it offers the most opportunities for those who seek their liberation from old mental prisons. And it is a time when the black jaguar rules and big change happens, so that a new time of creation may arrive and find hearts that are clean and open to see and support the unfolding of a new world that is still unknown. Many people may experience major losses in their lives. Some are brutally taken out of their comfort zone. Many see their old life not working anymore, or feel afraid when seeing destruction happen in the rest of the world. It all means just one thing: it is time to change. It is a time for the black jaguar rules over a time like this. When I read this ancient prophecy, I'm reminded of what the mystics write about when they talk about the dark night of the soul. And what I talk about today, the dark night of our species. I think our whole species is in a dark night, because we do not know where we're going. We do not know how we're going to pull out of this dive that we are in. But what the mystics all teach us, East and West, is that the dark night is in fact a very valuable place to be. We learn things in the dark night that we do not learn in the light, that we do not learn when comfort reigns. The chaos has something to teach us. But the key is to stick around to learn what it has to teach us. Hafiz, the great 14th century Sufi mystic, says, sometimes God wants to do us a great favor, turn us upside down and shake all the nonsense out. But most everyone I know, he says, when they find God is in such a drunken, playful mood, quickly pack their bags and hightail it out of town. So the immediate response, the reptilian brain response, is to get out of town when things are in chaos and upside down. But that will not do. For one thing, you can't move from one town to another today without this ambience encompassing you. It's everywhere. I was in Jamaica a few weeks ago. They're feeling it. Third world country. Their primary industry is tourism. And their beaches are being threatened, of course, by the rising seas. So their economy could go even further down the drain, etc. There are many other issues too, and especially because the reason I was called there was that there's a real issue among the young adults there, young men. A lot of violence. They say it's the third most violent country in the world. And so there was this big conference about men and young men. About 450 people there, all men. Although the wisdom figure behind the whole conference was a woman, of course. She was there kind of in disguise. But that was it. There are many issues. But so we really can't escape the chaos of our time. And so we need to buttress our hearts, build up that courage to face the chaos and the darkness, and see what it's trying to tell us. And I do think that this is part of the reason why despair moves in. The late B. Griffiths, a wonderful monk who lived in India for over 50 years, a Benedictine monk, he used to say, despair is a yoga. Some people do not experience God or the Spirit the divine in their life, until they undergo despair, until they undergo bottoming out and emptying. Many people in AA or other groups like that will tell you that that's their experience too. That it is the going deep into the darkness, into the chaos, into losing so much, into loss itself, that is the beginning of a deeper awareness and a deeper life. So, while despair is dangerous, it's not always a bad thing. It can be a yoga. It can be something to instruct us in purifying what our intentions are and developing that inner work that has so much to do with our growing up and our taking on the struggle of our time. So I want to speak to one movement of hope in our time that I'm involved in now, but then I want to kind of contextualize it along with other movements of hope in our time, because there are many, far too many for us to talk about in this one afternoon. But we have to be smart. We have to start reaching out to find new allies and realize we're not alone. But that's why I started with the story about scientists on an island. The scientists are feeling it. And yet, a lot of people aren't talking about it. A lot of people are feeling deep despair or anxiety, and we're not doing enough of sharing in that. We're still carrying the modern consciousness that says, especially for men, keep your deep feelings inside. Don't disturb us by telling us how deeply disturbed you are feeling about things. Let me tell you a story. It happened in Oakland several years ago. There's a wonderful couple there, Aisha Fati and her husband, Kokoman, who's from Ghana. Aisha is an African-American woman from America. As a young woman, she was a Black Panther. Then she got a conversion experience with Jared Jablowski and his movement of the attitudinal healing movement. And they're just an amazing couple. They took over a crack house in West Oakland, which is ghetto, and they turned it into their home. And they would have regular, Kokoman as a drummer. He was raised as a drummer as a youth in Ghana. So they'd have regular opportunities for the kids in the neighborhood to come over and drum and so forth. They did a lot of work in the community. They still are doing it. And every Friday night they'd have a gathering of adults to drum. And one day Aisha came up to me, about 7 or 8 years ago. I remember George Bush was president. So that would have been 9 years ago. And she said to me one day, Germans are coming to drum with us. And I said, Germans are coming to drum with you? I said, I didn't know there was a German community in Oakland. No, she said, they're not coming from Oakland, they're flying in from Germany to drum with us. I said, what? What's the meaning of that? Well, she said, this is what they tell us. They say, we're so worried about America. We feel America today is what Germany was in the 30s. And that we don't know how to deal with it, we don't know how to process it or talk about it. We just want to come and be among the poor and to drum in a nonverbal way to respond to our deep anxiety and fear about America. And that was 9 years ago. That was before anyone heard about trumpets, Trump and his trumpets, and the rest is going on. So I just tell you that story because it's a real story. It really happened. People flying in from Germany to drum in a ghetto because they're concerned about what's happening in our culture today. Now, part of the medicine for despair is creativity. The great Adam Rank, the great spiritual and psychological geniuses, I think, of the 20th century, he was in Freud's original group. He was the youngest, and everyone agreed he was the brightest Freud put him in charge of his 2 cultural journals, which he ran, he edited. And then he and Freud had a break, and Otto went his own way. But he died young, unfortunately, in 1939. And his last book, called Beyond Psychology, was actually written in Tahoe, in Northern California. He said, one day, people in Northern California will understand what I'm trying to say. But one of his points, he made many brilliant points, one of them is this. He says, pessimism comes from a repression of creativity. Pessimism comes from a repression of creativity. So this is why I talk about that inner work we've got to do. We've got to give birth to new forms of everything today. Of education, and religion, and economics, and politics, and I think this is very precious information, that the door to addressing pessimism has a lot to do with readdressing creativity. And of course, creativity is part of bringing the divine feminine back. As Jung says, creativity comes from the land of the mothers. So it's recovering the sense of the mothering that both men and women are capable of. That life is not essentially about control. Life is much more about giving birth. And we all give birth. We now know, thanks to the latest scientific cosmology, the whole universe is radically mothering and giving birth. Fecund and generative, far beyond any imagination we ever had. It was a summer ago, a year and a half ago, that science apologized and said, oops, we were wrong. This universe is not 300 billion galaxies, it's 2 trillion galaxies. Now, take some time to wrap your mind around that. Take like 5 years or something, if that's what you're taking. Where are you poets, and you playwrights, and you filmmakers, and you musicians, and you dancers to help us to get that fact into our consciousness? Our home is 2 trillion galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars. A scientist explained to me what that means. What that means is there are more stars in the universe, and let me tell you, a star is a really big deal. The sun is a star. And it's an awful lot bigger than the Earth. It's a big deal, a star. There are more stars in the universe than there are sands of grains of sand on our beaches all over the world. It's absolutely stunning, awe-inspiring, and enough to make us start life all over again in all of our institutions and professions. That's how you start over, with awe. As Rabbi Heschel says, awe is the beginning of wisdom. There's such a need today to move from knowledge to wisdom. We've got a lot of knowledge. We've added enough computers to store all our knowledge and all our information. But knowledge is not going to save us. As Rabbi Heschel said, humanity will not be saved by more information, but by more appreciation. Gratitude. That is what the mystics call the via positiva. And to me, to hear that our universe is 2 trillion galaxies and this tiny, tiny little planet where we live, with these amazing beings, from giraffes to elephants to tigers to rainforests to oceans to whales to fishes to rivers to rocks and mountains and desert, all of it is, well, it's our home. But it's so precious, it's so singular, it's so unique amidst 2 trillion galaxies. And we don't know, there may be other intelligent life out there, but we don't know. But even if there is, I wish them more intelligence than we've exhibited. There are some scientific theories that there were other species similar to ours out there, and that they destroyed themselves, like we're doing, through ecological destruction or hydrogen bombs, something similar, some other stupid thing. That's one theory being thrown around these days. Of course, another one is that this this universe of 2 trillion galaxies is only one of an infinite number of universes. All this stuff can kind of freak you out, but let's get back to Earth. Literally. But this is a sign of the times that the return of creativity is truly at the heart of things. There's this wonderful book I discovered just recently, I can't recommend it highly enough, called Beauty and the Soul: The Extraordinary Power of Everyday Beauty to Heal Your Life. It's done by an Italian. This English is a translation from the Italian, Piero Ferrucci. And he was a disciple of Roberto Assagiali, the founder of psychosynthesis. So Piero Ferrucci is a therapist in the school of psychosynthesis, but also an author of several really good books. But this book is fabulous. I've read a lot of books on beauty, including Rollo May's very good book on beauty. This is the best I've ever read, but it's also very up to date. There have been quite a few scientific experiments that he includes in his discussion here of beauty that are really very useful today, and that are quite recent in terms of the discoveries there. So I want to share with you just a few of his findings on page 324 through 25. He says that there's a section called priming. So he says these are surprising aspects of the mind. So Yale University and some other experiments have been done to see how much people are affected when they're primed to think a certain way. For example, a verbal test that uses words that suggest old age, such as elderly, gray, wrinkles, and lonely. This becomes, when people hear these words, they feel older. Metaphors count. Then they had some people they handed out hot coffee to, and others they handed out cold coffee. And they found that people who held the hot coffee, they didn't know what was coming next. They were just sitting there holding hot coffee, others were holding cold coffee. Those who held hot coffee turned out to be less selfish and more sociable than those who were holding cups of cold coffee. So he says this research gives us a new perspective on the functioning of our unconscious. The astonishing insight here is the extent to which apparently causal and casual and irrelevant stimuli can change our attitudes. What would happen if instead of the detergent smell, that's another test, instead of the cold coffee, another stimulus altogether were at work, a video game where we steal cars and saw off people's arms, or listen to Beethoven's Sonata Opus 111. To what extent will violent, unpleasant, shocking stimuli on the one hand, or beautiful, calming, and harmonious ones on the other, enter our unconscious and influence the choices we make and the way we live, we exist? This is an experiment of ugliness. In studying this kind of experience, we see how ugliness can depress and harm us, just as beauty can uplift and benefit us. What interests me most here is to highlight the fact that the experience does not end when we have had it, but for better or worse, it keeps living within us. So you see the capacity for beauty to be carried around in our everyday approach to life, or of ugliness and violence. What we see and hear lives on, haunting or healing, puzzling or reassuring, enlightening or shocking, its beauty goes to work. There is a kind of preternatural serenity, he says, that we tap into when we have experiences of beauty. Preternatural serenity. The psyche then is alive, he says. It changes, creates, makes connections, idealizes, assimilates, enriches itself. It matures. Is this a banal statement? Stability is not destiny. The time comes when we realize that stability is not destiny. We see it as possible to change and to grow. Breakthroughs to freedom, transformations really happen. Aquinas says, hope is about the possible. Despair is about the impossible. So we're getting all kinds of messages today about the impossible. And we can choose to test what's possible instead. And of course, to fight denial. A year and a half ago, in January 2016, I was part of a conference in Florida on climate change and the seas rising. And the first speaker was a scientist. He got up and had slides in Florida. Florida today, 10 years from today, chop. 20 years from today, chop, chop. 30 years from today, chop, chop, chop. That's what's happening in Florida. It's going under. And at the same time, there were two presidential candidates from Florida running for presidency who were in denial about climate change, and the governor. The governor was so in denial about climate change that he forbade, just a couple months before the conference, he forbade any state worker to use the term climate change in his or her emails, which, by the way, Trump has done as of a few months ago for governmental purposes. Now, at the same time, I visited South Miami, and there was 6 inches of water on the streets down there. So the power of denial, we just can't underestimate it. We humans are amazing creatures, but we have this shadow side to all of our strengths, and that we could live and choose to live in a bubble of denial, choose to be the only country in the world except for Syria, which is, of course, involved in a great civil war, that opts out of the Paris climate change accords. So we have to address denial. It's a spiritual problem. Meister Eckhart says, God is the denial of denial. So whoever's in denial about something important, God's no longer around, because there's no truth around. And truth is one of the names for God anywhere. So denial is an option to shut ourselves off, to be ignorant. Aquinas said that to choose to be ignorant of something that's important is a mortal sin, meaning it spreads evil everywhere. Deadly. It's deadly. It spreads death everywhere. So these are some of the issues we have to be standing up to today, and we can. Now, let me give you one study that came out just last week in the New York Times about anxiety today. It's really an amazing article. It's called "Why Are More American Teenagers Than Ever Suffering from Severe Anxiety?" And it found that over the last decade, anxiety has overtaken depression as the most common reason college students seek counseling services. The American College Health Association found a significant increase. In 1911, 50% of college students were anxious, and today, it's 62% of undergraduates reporting overwhelming anxiety in the previous year. In 1985, 18% said they were anxious. By 2010, the number increased to 29%. Last year, it surged to 41%. Plus, a doubling of hospital admissions for suicidal teenagers over the last 10 years. The highest rates occurring soon after they return to school each fall. And one nurse dealing with public schools in Massachusetts said there's just been a steady increase of severely anxious students the last years. Well, of course, I think this anxiety among teenagers comes from, of course, the culture and the parents. And the parental age is what adults are doing that are rendering the young more and more anxious. So, There are many movements of hope, I think, in our time, and I want to talk about some, and of creative options. But I want to talk now about the movement that I'm involved in, and we call it the Order of the Sacred Earth. And this is how it came about. It came to me in a dream 2 years ago. It was an odd dream. I've never had any dream like it. And 4 in the morning, it woke me up with 2 words: do it, capital letters, do it, 4 exclamation points. And I woke up, 4, do it. What is it? To start a new order, a spiritual order, not a religious order, but an order that would bring together young and old to reaffirm our commitment to the earth and its sacredness. So there's one vow that would bind us all together. And that vow is that I promise to be the best lover of Mother Earth that I can be, and the best defender of Mother Earth that I can be. To be a mystic, a lover, and a warrior, a prophet, defender. That's it. And given that common promise, this order would be open to everybody of whatever religious tradition or no tradition. Atheists would be welcome if they're at home with a pledge like that, and Buddhists, and Hindus, and Jews, and Christians, and Muslims, and goddess people, and indigenous people. No one would have to leave their tradition. Rather, you would bring along the wisdom of our traditions to the table. And we have in mind a self-organizing community. There is not a blueprint, there's not a 5-year plan. We want there to be chapters in different parts of the world, different cities. There's already a chapter happening here in the LA area, different from this end of LA. It's in Orange County with the In Spirit Church of Religious Science, or Community of Spiritual Living down there. They're very excited about making something happen in their world. And also, there's someone connected to that church who lives near San Diego, runs a permaculture farm and so forth. She's about 30, and she's excited about doing it, bringing it down there to San Diego area. I was in Tempe last week. People got very interested there, Tempe, Arizona. I was invited 3 weeks ago to speak at an unusual congregation in Boulder, Colorado, where Jews and Lutherans gather together and worship together, but separately. That is to say, the Jewish service is there, and the Lutherans are present, and the Lutheran service is there, and the Jews are present. They invited me to come to talk about this exact topic, preach on it for half an hour, and they got all excited. And that particular Jewish congregation is related to Rabbi Zalman Schachtner, the founder of the Jewish Renewal Movement. But my idea is this, that we really need intergenerational wisdom today. We need places and communities where the old and the young can gather. This came out of a study I did a few years ago in my book, Occupy Spirituality, in which we interviewed a lot of young adults in America today. 21 to 33 is how we define young adult. And I did the book with Adam Bucko, an amazing young man in his 30s, who worked for 15 years with young adults living on the streets in New York City, and had marvelous results. And he included meditation and spiritual practice as part of their healing process, and certainly a lot of creativity too. But he's had amazing results. So he and I together did that work. And we made these questionnaires that we sent all over the country, and one of the questions was about elders. We asked these young adults, do you have elders in your life, and do you want them there? And 98% said, we want elders, but we can't find them. And I talked to a lot of elders who are interested in the young people, but can't find them. So we've got to do something to get together. The subtitle of the book just came out a week or two ago, Order of the Sacred Earth, an Intergenerational Vision of Love and Action. So the intergenerational part is right at the heart of it, because the 2 directors I have to start this, co-directors, are a man 23 and a woman 28. They're the directors. It's the younger generation that has to carry this, because I'm convinced. I look at things historically, and I look at the history of religion in the West, and this is what I see. In the 3rd century, often religion goes on a dive. And when it does, orders pop out. Because an order is a much more flexible and responsive thing than religion is. So in the 3rd century, there was kind of a dive going on in the Christian church, and then you had this movement that we call the Desert Fathers and the Desert Mothers. So a lot of young people went out to the desert because they couldn't take the empire and as it was in the 3rd century. Even before it became Christian, they couldn't take it. Then in the 5th and 6th century, you had St. Benedict and his sister Scholastica, who launched the Benedictine movement, which became really the most visible monastic movement in the West, right up to the late 12th century. And it accomplished a lot of good, including farming techniques, and of course scholarship and libraries and the writing out of books for the printing press and all that be done by hand and all that. You needed communities to do it. So they really did accomplish a lot that was good and worthwhile. But like everything human, it ran into bad days, and they got fat, they got lazy, and they got far too connected to the feudal system. So when the feudal system started breaking up in the 12th century, they were pretty much on the side of the bad guys. Then you had Francis of Assisi and St. Dominic, two contemporaries, late 12th, early 13th century, started a whole new movement, whole new orders, the Franciscan order, the Dominican order, and they were about the new culture, which was anti-feudal and anti-Christendom, and they wanted to return to the spirit of Jesus and the poor and so forth. And Dominic, because he came from Spain, which is of course where the real awakening was happening, because Islam was translating Aristotle and other great thinkers into Latin, and it was coming in through Spain. Spain was a more advanced country in Europe at the time, and of course Islam was way ahead of the Christian West at that time. So the whole idea of the university was born then, and it came from Islam. In Baghdad, they had translators going 24 hours a day translating Aristotle into Latin and other languages. So then of course, you also had the Big E movement in the 13th century, which was the women's movement. And it was not about nuns, and it wasn't about being married. It was a third option, about women living in community, making a living with their hands for the most part, but offering an alternative lifestyle. And then, of course, in the 16th century, we had the Reformation. Now, this past week, we just commemorated the 500th day of Luther pounding his 95 Theses at the Wittenberg church door. And there's a lot to say about that. But whether you're directly related to Luther or indirectly related, we've all been profoundly affected by that movement. And it was a movement. And of course, it tapped into the movement of nationalism, nation states. It tapped into new economics and certainly new politics. And of course, a new technology, because the printing press had everything to do with the launching of the Renaissance and of the humanistic movement of which Luther was a part. And of course, you also had in the 16th century, of course, many other Protestant movements, Calvin and Knox and many others, and of course, Henry VIII. So I believe that you could interpret religious history in America, the Protestant movement, as really a movement of new orders in the 16th century, late orders. Because each of these denominations have their own charismatic leader, their own ritual, their own theology, their own charism, their spirit, just like you had in the various religious orders, from Benedictine to Carmelite to Dominican, Franciscan, etc., in the Catholic world. But also in the 16th century, you had Ignatius, you had the launching of the Jesuit order. All of this, the Jesuits and the Protestants, were responding to the corruption in Rome, in the Vatican at the time. by creating new orders. So now, here we are in the 21st century, and I'm looking around for new orders, and I don't see any. What I see is a lot of souls, S-O-L-E-S, leaving churches. See, I say the back of people's shoes as they exit churches. And check the statistics about how few young people are interested either in the Protestant denominations or the Catholic denominations today. And yet, that doesn't mean they're not on a spiritual search. I think many of them are. But my point is that we should learn from the past, including the mistakes of the past. Francis of Assisi, for example. He started this order. He didn't want his men or women to be clerics, that is, to be priests. He sensed. Francis was highly intuitive and very smart. And he felt that if his order got into the hierarchical game of being priest and all the rest, that would corrupt the simplicity of his message and of the Gospels themselves. So he forbade his brothers to become priests, or you're to be priests, or even to get educated. But what happened? 2 years before he died, the church took his order from him, and they turned it into a clerical order. And now his followers would be priests. And he died 2 years later, I think, of a broken heart, because he recognized what would happen. Within a generation after Francis died, Franciscans were running the Inquisition. This is what I think Francis intuited, and that's what killed him. He died of a broken heart. Now, to be fair, the Dominicans too, within a generation after Dominic died, were running the Inquisition, the Albigensian Inquisition. So my point is this: let's learn from history. There are some good things about this thing like an order, and there are some dangerous things. And that's where I say we don't need a religious order. We don't want an order, a community, a movement that's beholden to any religious headquarters anywhere. Let's let this be a self-organizing community. And it will be what it will be. Who shows up? And you participate, you share, you learn from one another, and you criticize one another as you care to. And of course, with social media today and all the rest, internet, you can be, linked in many ways without always being in the same room or something. So that's one of the principles of this order. But it be spiritual and not religious. That doesn't mean that religious people who still identify with religion are not welcome. They're very welcome. But we're going back to something more that is far older than religion when you're talking about the order of the sacred earth. And one young woman who I talked to about this, she's 26, she said to me, she said, this is exactly what my generation needs. We're so dispersed by the social media. We're so all over the place and so distracted. We need a focus. And this could be that kind of focus. Of course, that's what a vow is. A vow focuses us. Now, when you talk about vows in America, people know about marriage vows. And some people know about orders that people take vows. But the truth is that, Gandhi took lots of vows in his life. Vows are marvelous ways to focus yourself and to kind of bring your values up in your face. I have a friend who heard about this order idea, and she's in her 50s or 60s. She said, my husband and I got married 10 years ago. We created our own vows, and then we put them on the refrigerator door. And sometimes when things aren't going perfectly, I stare at that vow thing again. I go back to the refrigerator door. And again, it's a reminder. It's a reminder of what we're about here. And I think the vow we've talked about is a reminder that we not take the earth for granted, that we not take the sacred for granted, but that we stand up. First, we do the inner work. We breathe more deeply the gratitude of being here, including at this difficult but important moment in human and planetary history. We breathe that deep, and then out of that we commit ourselves to the work that we do, in whatever way we do it, whether it's as artists or as therapists or as clergy or as activists of many kind, as politicians, as business people. There's work for everybody. So kind of in a nutshell, that's what our vision is about. Now, I met Skylar Wilson, who's 33, several years ago. He's actually the director of our Cosmic Mass. He was doing his master's at the Institute of CIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies, with Brian Swim, the cosmologist there. And Brian called me up one day and said, I have this real bright student who needs a spiritual director. Would you be a spiritual director? And I said, I don't do much of that. I'm too busy doing other things, but I'll have tea with him. So we sat down and we hit it off, and so we've been friends since, and we've been working together. And he had a dream. Now, I had this dream about the order, and about a month or two later, he had a dream, and he talks about it in this book. So he and I, in this book, we write about, each of us, about a 40-page essay. And then Jen Listig, who's the other co-director, she's 28, and is a friend of Skylar, she writes a short essay. And then at the end of the book, we have multiple short essays, about 15 2- or 3-page essays by various people, some of whose names you know, Levi Starr, or Brian Swim, the cosmologist, David Corton, who also did the foreword to this book. So we put it out there to get people to respond. What visions do you get out of this? So we're creating a blog where we're inviting everybody to respond and start developing our visions together. And this version of the book is not the official version. It's a private version. The official launching the book won't be till June. The publisher will put it out publicly and get the media and all that going. But that gives us time to kind of get the order started. We're going to have our first vow ritual on the solstice, December 21st of this year. And we're hoping to make it a live streaming thing, so people in different parts of the country and the world, there are Australians who are telling about this and some other people, might take a vows together. So you can kind of be alerted to that, and if people in this part of the LA area feel moved to participate in any way, of course, we'll somehow link up and see what we can do together. But again, I don't think there's much of an argument that religion is in a downtrend right now. I remember 2 or 3 years ago, I was having lunch with Brian Swim, the cosmologist. He and his wife are practicing Catholics, and they had a 29 and a 30-year-old son at the time. And I said, Brian, are your sons practicing? And he looked up and he said, Matt, he said, I don't know anyone under 30 who's practicing who isn't weird. Pretty blunt statement from a parent who is practicing about this generation. It's a funny response, but it's interesting response. And I don't think it's altogether off track at all. So I think it's part of the elders' task to offer to work with the young, to offer some new forms for spirituality and what might be authentic religion. And I see this as such a form. And as I say, we want to learn from what we know from the universe that things are self-organizing. You don't need a lot of canon laws and a lot of lawyers to make something like this work. What you need is the heart of a lot of people and the energy. And then see how it helps, how it will make us less separate, less isolated. And above all, how it will bring together the old and the young. And that the young have the leadership will. By the way, when we did this survey with the young adults about elders, not only did they say, most of them say we can't find elders, but then they said, the few elders we do find, they talk too much. So there's a lesson there too, that at this time in history, the first work of the elder is to listen. Because what the young are facing today is unprecedented. And whether it's fully conscious or whether it's unconscious, they're picking it up. That's why there's this anxiety. And the future of the planet is clearly in jeopardy, as we know it. The planet as we know it, the planet is going to survive the human species, but it may not survive it with an awful lot of beauty still intact. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And that's where I want to talk a little more about other hopeful movements at this time. And then we can throw this open to discussion. But, for example, I want to tell you about a recent book edited by Paul Hawkins that just came out recently called Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. It's an amazing book. And he actually says in there that with these, if we engage these activities as soon as possible, we could, by 2050, reverse global warming, not stop it or slow it, but turn it backwards. I mean, if that's not hope, I don't know what is. And let me tell you about this scientific conference that was so weighed down in despair this summer. By the end of the week, 2 young scientists stood up separately. One of them said, well, we now know, the technology we now have, we could do the following. We could create islands 1,000 miles off the Atlantic coast, so it wouldn't be in anybody's backyard, no one would even see it, with turbine windmills. And with the power we could generate there, we could provide all the electrical needs of North America. No gas, no oil, no coal would be required. We could do that, like that, with what we now know. And another fellow stood up and he said, if we could quadruple the capacity of batteries, and we've already doubled them, so actually we only have to double them one more time, we could take these batteries to the whole southern hemisphere, Africa, Latin America, southern Asia. And these countries, which of course are among the poorest in the world, could totally leapfrog the Industrial Revolution. Because by increasing capacity for storing, and of course in the southern hemisphere you have a lot of sun, you could store all this solar energy. You wouldn't, once again, you wouldn't need to go into coal, oil, and gas. We could get this done if we had the will, you see. So to me, those are 2 stories about hope, things about what's possible. It's about what's possible. And there are many others that are circulating. Here is, for example, the movement that calls itself 350.org. They are taking a pledge to build a fossil-free world. They say we are expanding the global fossil-free campaign to build on the huge success of divestment. With tens of thousands of new people and groups everywhere, fossil-free will supercharge the global climate movement, with ordinary people using the power of local action. We will rise up in communities of every kind to demand a just and equitable transition to a completely fossil-free world with 100% renewable energy for us all. And they talk about the success they've had getting companies, just like in years back, we were instrumental in helping to divest universities and other corporate entities with lots of money from the South African apartheid. So you can inculcate values to banks and others that are currently carrying on the fossil fuel oppression. And they talk about specific cases. They say, in the Pacific, climate warriors are standing up to say they are not drowning. We refuse to drown with the rising of the seas. And choosing 100% renewable, they are fighting and connecting the resistance of the global fossil fuel industry with the long and vital traditions of their islands. Communities in Ghana are refusing the path of coal dependency and choosing 100% renewable energy for their homes instead. And then uniting with communities all across the continent to decolonize Africa. C-O-A-L spelled in capital letters. decolonized Africa. Communities and municipalities everywhere from Brazil to Brisbane coming together to ban fracking. Fossil free is about all of us finding our power in local communities, traditions, and institutions to put an end to the coal, oil, and gas economies and getting to work on the 100% renewable energy for all. So clearly, to me, this is the sign of our times. This is spirit of work. And this is what charges young people. I can't tell you how many young people I've met who are in permaculture movements, they're like the first generation of monks and nuns or something like that. I mean, it is a life commitment for good reason. They figured it out. They've used their left brains too. We've been doing agriculture wrong for 10,000 years. I almost fell out of my chair. I wasn't in a rocking chair, but I almost fell out of my chair. It's the most radical sentence I've ever heard in my life, I think. There was a farmer saying we've been doing agriculture wrong for 10,000 years. And then he went on. Ever since we started planting seeds and turning over the soil, we've been asking for the destruction of the soil. We've been doing it. We've just gotten much better and more efficient at it. But then it made me think, have we been doing education wrong for 10,000 years? And religion? And economics? And politics? If a farmer can tell us, a smart farmer who's done the farming, and he's created, see, this is why he won that Genius Award, he has this alternative farm going on, which was there, I visited it, in which they're imitating nature. And instead of turning the soil over and planting seeds, which is the beginning of the end of the destruction of soil and water, they imitate the dropping of seeds that nature does on the prairie. And at that time, and that was about 15 years ago, they were at something like 90% of yield equal to fertilizing agriculture. Tradition, if you will, small t. So my point is, don't underestimate the power of human imagination, folks. Creativity is the number one thing our species has going for it. And I think a movement, like a spiritual Lord to dedicate Mother Earth, it would give support and of a spiritual kind, and that's so needed. Because if you're going to be in a big struggle, you better be a big person. We got to grow our hearts. Another word for a big heart is courage. Cur, large, big heart. David Stang is here with his wife, Dara. And he lives in the area. And his sister was murdered 12 years ago in the Amazon. She stood up to the rapists of the rainforest and of the peasant agriculture there, and she became a leader. She was 42 years a Catholic sister working in Brazil. And one day she was assassinated, died a martyr, because she had the courage. And courage is built up by joy. It's not just about being fiercely anti-something. It's not. That won't do. You burn out. Zealots don't really last very long. You know, Julia Butterfly, who chose to live in the trees in Northern California. She thought she was going to be up there a few days. She was up there 2 years, but they were fighting the Pacifica Lumber from Texas, who were going to chop down these ancient trees and so forth. But she went up there with a young man. The young man lasted 2 weeks. And she talks about him, how he was fiercely angry. He was so full of anger, blah, 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 blah. But he only lasted 2 weeks. She lasted 2 years. Why? Well, she talks about it. She was able to pray. She was able to not see the loggers as her enemy, but to go deeper than that. That as Buddha teaches, you know, that it's what Jesus said too. Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. The people are ignorant. It's not always their fault that they're ignorant. It doesn't mean that you yield on the issue of principle, but it does mean that you treat others as human beings worthy of dignity too. You don't just write them off. And you don't turn it into a reptilian brain game. I win, you lose. Men are so easily tempted to that because we've been trained to think that way from the time we're very young. To think like reptiles. To think that I win and you lose. That my worth is proportionate to your losing. And it just doesn't work anymore. So any movement to tame the reptilian brain, and that is what meditation does, is part of the movement of hope in our time. And we have to make more and more available these practices that tame the reptilian brain so that the mammal brain, the brain of compassion, can emerge once again and build community. I want to say a word from Albert Einstein about religion. Because I shared this passage with the scientists this summer. None of them had ever heard this paragraph from Einstein. And they kind of went wild, as wild as scientists get. Here's Einstein. Humanity is now moving into the third phase of religious experience, cosmic religion. So now notice, Einstein's stepping back from racial religion as we know it. And of course he was, being Jewish and smart, very, very profoundly disappointed in most of the churches in Germany and how they responded and did not respond to the Nazis. There were some exceptions, of course, but as a whole, the Protestants and the Catholics flunked the test, as he saw it. And so he says that we have to move beyond religions that are nation-centered. This would be, of course, German Lutheranism, and it would certainly be American religion. He says, with his growing knowledge of the vastness of the universe and its trillions of stars, now he couldn't say trillions of galaxies because we just learned this. You know something Einstein didn't know. Each one many times larger than our planet, stars whose light take hundreds of years to reach our eyes. Humans must consider it an insult when we are told that our conduct should be motivated by fear of punishment or hope of reward. I think a lot of young people are there today. They're not buying some of the mythologies of religion about heaven and hell. And it is just as much an insult to the God who created all these marvels. That word marvel is very important to Einstein. That is his definition of miracle. And that's the real etymological meaning of the word miracle. I think the modern age, when religion and science split, again in the 17th century, that we made up this kind of weird notion of miracle. It's about walking on water or disturbing the laws or habits of nature. But that's a very ancillary, tiny meaning of miracle. The real meaning of miracle is exactly what Einstein said. Marvel. That which is marvelous, that makes us marvel, that gives us awe and wonder. Such is our existence. The fact that our bodies work. It is just as much an insult to the God who created all these marvels to be lowered to a human level. The true religious genius has always been endowed with a sense of cosmic religion. This oneness of creation, to my sense, is God. The oneness of creation, to Einstein, is God. Now, as our awareness of creation has just expanded to 2 trillion galaxies, that's a oneness, and it is a oneness, because it all began smaller than a zygote, this universe of ours. So it's a oneness. We all come from the same moment. And of course, we carry the same elements in our bodies. This oneness of creation, to my sense, is God. This concept of God will unite all nations. A new age of peace will be inaugurated when all people profess a cosmic religion, when the youth have become laymen with scientific minds. I think that observation by Einstein is really stunning. And I think that it really fits our time when we have a new cosmology. And with it, a new grasp and a sense of the sacred. because we have lost that sense. Thomas Berry says, to recover the sense of the sacred, you have to recover a sense of the universe, because this is the primary sacrament, the primary sacred entity. And once we recover that sense, everything gets washed with it, gets graced by it. So, here's another amazing piece of hope. Several years ago, 2 scientists came up with the crazy idea to dump 12,000 tons of oranges in the Amazon rainforest, where a lot of destruction has been happening. They dumped, I think it was like 12 years ago, dumped 12,000 tons of oranges. That's a lot of oranges, orange peelings and all that in the Amazon rainforest. What's happened? The rainforest has come back in that area that was denuded. That there are actually ways, if you're crazy enough and creative enough and playful enough and wild enough, to actually bring a rainforest back. And of course, this idea didn't just come out the top of their heads. They knew some science. But, so again, despair is about the impossible, hope is about the possible. And, well, you know, if I were a betting man, I wouldn't bet that our species is going to be smart enough to turn things around as rapidly as we need to. I wouldn't bet on that, but I certainly would, I think it's possible. I would expect it of humans who have hearts and who have minds and hands and creativity. And especially when I'm with young people. So many young people have a vocation, a calling. And it's not a calling from the church or religion. It's a calling from Mother Earth. They're hearing this calling. I meet so many young people. Just when I was in Tempe last week, and I preached at a Sunday service, it was a Methodist service. And people come up, and I talked about the order. And I talked about the bigger picture, because it was Luther's Reformation and everything, but I brought in this order idea. A 19-year-old guy came up to me. He said, I'm majoring in sustainability. He said, I'm just crazy about this order you talked about. He said, that's what I need. That's what we need. That's what my generation needs. And it means a lot to me that there are elders out there who would be side by side with us in this movement. So that's what keeps me going. And you know, Aquinas says an amazing thing to say about young people. He says young people are far more full of hope than older people. And this is one reason elders have to hang around the young. That we need the hope. We've seen so much of life and so much of politics and the rest that we can get cynical real easily. But Aquinas says the nearest thing to a young person is a drunken person. Drunken people are intoxicated on liquor, but young people are intoxicated on life. They see nothing but possibilities ahead of them. They've not been so subject to disappointment or to loss as the older people. Now, of course, I think young people today are less innocent, if you will. They have heard a lot of stories about what's happening, but there's still, you hang out with young people, there's the energy, there's the sense of fun and play that are absolutely essential for any work of creativity. As Carl Jung says, play and fantasy are the basis of creativity. So this idea, now I think what we need for elders is rites of passage. We did a rite of passage ritual 2 summers ago. The Crises communities did. We did it in Berkeley, and it was really powerful. And we had young people help design it, along with some elders. And I think that elders have been abused in our culture at many levels, and part of it is religion, of course. And because elders have not been really told the important role of elders. Our capitalist culture tells us essentially that you're no longer buying lots of stuff for your family in your house, you kind of are a non-entity. Why don't you go play golf the rest of your life? Play the stock market or something, some other adolescent game. We're not being told that elders are important. Well, here's a scientific story, fact, that I think is really important for elders to hear and for you who aren't elders to spread to your elders. And it's this. 2 years ago, I think it was, this anthropologist, a woman, she gathered a team of anthropologists, and they went out to answer one question. Why did our Neanderthal brothers and sisters die out, and our immediate ancestors live on? Now, the prevailing thesis was that we beat them up in war. But what we now know is that many of us are carrying Neanderthal DNA. So we weren't just making war against these people. What she found is this, that your average Neanderthal adult died around the age of 40. In other words, there were only 2 generations. There weren't 3 generations. There were no elders. That's why they died out. Now this for me explains why every indigenous tribe I've ever met around the world honors the elders. I think they remember. It's not about feeling sorry for old people. It's not about cherry on the cake. They remember that with 3 generations, the children go further. With 2 generations, it's a real risk to survive. So I think that scientific fact should be at the bottom of every elder's consciousness today. We're not around because we're cute. We're around because we're necessary. And elders have to hear this. There's something to give back. And as I said earlier, the first thing you give back is listening. But then there will be occasions to share your stories, and to share your wisdom, and to share what it means to undergo loss, and to resurrect from that. And what it means to put your conscience into motion, and to be willing to pay the price, and all the rest. Courage. How you learn courage, whom you learn courage from. Where does this Dorothy learn her courage? And what's the relationship between joy and a big heart, which is what courage is? There's an absolute relationship. Aquinas says, joy enlarges the heart. Joy enlarges the heart. Someone just came up to me before our meeting today. She said she was raised in a Protestant denomination where original sin was big and suffering was big and all that. But since then she's been moving into this creation spirituality, where Aquinas says, sheer joy is God's, and this demands companionship. So in other words, the whole universe is here because of joy. So we need spiritual movements that put joy and justice out front. And it's possible. And that's what I would expect of any order of the Sacred Earth. That it begins in joy and it culminates in justice, which in turn distributes the joy more broadly. Therefore, it returns to joy. There's more joy that way. So I think we need rites of passage for elders, and whether churches do them, synagogues do them, mosques do them, I don't care. We should be doing them, maybe in City Hall or something. We need rites of passage for elders so they can be more conscious, more focused on their special role. And the young should be involved in these rites of passage. Of course, we need rites of passage for the young too. Skylar Wilson, the co-director of this order here, as we get it off the ground, his main work is working with young people in rites of passage and a vision quest for young adults as well as for teenagers separately. Teenagers are the Stepping Stones movement. He's very involved in. And for years he's been living in the wilderness. That is his religion, he says. The lessons he's learned from the wilderness. But again, at both ends of the spectrum, our young people and our older people, we're lacking rites of passage. And both need it. So why not get them together and have fun creating them? And another dimension that the scholar has been talking about lately to this order, and I guess this would be about the last thing I say, but he says he really thinks one of the most important things we could do right out of the gate is to bring together the generations. Because I know when I go to churches, for example, of various denominations, there are often, very few young people there. And the older people, they want young people around, but the young don't feel real welcome in churches these days, a lot of them, etc. So something like an order is a different place to meet young and old together. But it does involve values, the values of the sacred earth. And of course to create rituals together. And that brings the artists into the picture. Why do 65,000 people a year go to a desert in August for Burning Man? Well, because ritual is important. And this is one ritual that draws a lot of people. Now, they're not elders for the most part. But the point is that the creating of rituals together of various kinds has tremendous promise. I've been involved in that work for over 20 years. It's called the Cosmic Mass, bringing rave into worship. And it brings young and old together, because we've all got bodies, and we all have hearts that want to both celebrate our joy and our thanks, but also to grieve together, That work of grieving is so important today. If we don't do the grieving, we're not going to have the creativity to give birth to all the different forms of work and workplaces and professions that we have to do. So these are a few of my thoughts about hope and about the order of the sacred earth. And I really look forward to our conversation, and also to what this arena, this area of Los Angeles and beyond might feel moved to give birth to here, to participate in regarding this. Let me close with a line from Indigenous Wisdom, because bringing forth, instead of seeing our religions as my religion's better than your religion, my God can beat up your goddess, and all this crazy stuff that comes straight out of the reptilian brain, instead of that, why don't we celebrate differences like the French do? Vive la différence. Celebrate the differences. Isn't it wonderful that we have Indigenous wisdom still in spite of genocide for 500 years? Isn't it amazing? What special wisdom do they bring to the table? And believe me, speaking personally, I've been more blessed, more grounded, more healed, and more empowered by sweat lodges and vision quests and sun dances and powwows than I have by the mother religion that I grew up in, the Roman Catholic Church. It's not either or, though. I'm grateful to what I got from the Catholic Church. But my point is that we're all hungry today. Obviously, our species isn't doing very well. And that would seem to indict all our religions. So let's this fellow who sat on his porch and rocked and said, we're doing agriculture wrong for 10,000 years. He also said this, he said, humanity should begin with its strongest point, which is an admission of our ignorance. We're much better at ignorance than we are anything else. We should celebrate that. We should begin with that. We're not all full of knowledge and truth. We're full of ignorance. And let's begin there. And then go hunting, gathering for the seeds of wisdom, the seeds of truth, the seeds of possibility, the seeds of hope. To me, that makes a lot of sense. But he repeated that about 4 times in our conversation. We should begin with our strong suit, which is our ignorance, not our supposed knowledge. But I want to close with just a line or two from. Here's another sign of hope. It's a wonderful work of Naomi Klein in her book, This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus the Climate. Oh, it's a marvelous book. She talks about what we need is a full-throated debate about values, about what we owe to one another based on our shared humanity, and what it is that we collectively value more. What is it we collectively value more than economic growth and corporate profits. You know, we should have a full-throated debate about these things. I just love her work. And she called me on the phone about 6 or 8 months ago. She said, I want to talk to you because I've been invited to the Vatican to talk there about climate change. And of course, it's from Laudate Si, the encyclical. And she said, I'm a Jew, I'm an atheist, and I'm a feminist, and I'm going to the Vatican. Can you imagine? She said, I never would have imagined those words coming out of my mouth. But here I am. So she said, I want some feedback on what you do with the Vatican, and you're an atheist and a feminist and a Jew, and really fun conversation. But I just love her. She's a prophet in our time. I really do believe. And her most recent book is quite a short work called No Is Not Enough, N-O. And she says, the real surprise for all involved is that we are so much more than we've been told we are. We are so much more than we've been told we are. See, that's what I mean by original blessing. The original sin ideology has permeated our cultures, permeated education, has permeated economics. Capitalism is based on original sin ideology. That you don't have what it takes, you've got to buy it from some outside saving source, such as whatever it is, a car company, a toothpaste company, or whatever it is. See, it's a secular version of original sin. Original sin shrinks our dignity and our beauty and our empowerment, our capacity to do something. It leads to fear and despair. So, of course, religion has to break out of its shackles at the same time that our other professions have to break out of theirs. And one of the points that Naomi Klein makes is about the importance of new movements. That she says, this is where the energy is going to come, from new movements. So that's what I mean by a new order. An order is a community and a movement. But we can be conscious about it, what it is not, and what it might be, and then see who shows up and what we care to make of it. But I never did get back to this one page we're going to end. That's the yellow page. This wonderful quote. It actually came from a Hopi discussion of their marvelous pottery. I just visited the new Museum of the West in Tempe, Arizona, and I was very moved by a lot of things, but especially this exhibit of Hopi pottery. And there was such a beautiful statement there, which I'm having trouble finding. Hold on, be patient for 1 second. But it's something about how our bodies, these bodies will disappear. But we can leave behind the songs of our hands. I just love that phrase. That pottery is a song of our hands. We can leave this behind for future generations. And of course, some of these pots are 800, 1,000 years old. And they're still singing. They're still beautiful. We can translate the hieroglyphics that are on them, the songs that are being told us. But you can make a bigger thing of this, you see. That it's all about our leaving, isn't it? Otto Rank defines the artist as one who wants to leave behind a gift. So these artists, these Hopi artists, were aware of their mortality, as we are of ours, hopefully. But they want to leave behind a gift, the songs of their hands. See, that hands can sing too. It's not just the voice. So I ask, what are the songs of our hands? When we roll up our sleeves with hope today, what is it that we're committing to leaving behind? And what kind of music will we make for future generations? I think that's the bottom line question. Thank you.